right, let's try this again. Ruben Owens committed to Louisville. Your overall reaction to that?
Yeah. I think I'll probably mimic what most of you guys are going to say is that there's a little bit of surprise there. Granted, we started to see Texas maybe move away a little bit from him. Last couple of weeks, they kind of tapped the brakes a little bit. They're all in on Cedric Baxter, a very highly coveted running back out of Florida. They do have to keep Trey Wisner committed. So I think that maybe if you're reading between the lines from a Texas standpoint, you could maybe see Louisville. But I thought A&M would continue to push there. But give credit to Louisville and their staff. They've done a great job of recruiting some high-profile kids this year. Surprise probably would be a little bit of an understatement at this point, though.
Scott Satterfield needs this, though, right, Jeremy? I mean, he's under the gun there at Louisville. They got a new AD. They haven't really been anything more than very kind of blah on the field. So he needs to pop some in recruiting, doesn't he?
He has, and I mean, they've got the number 9 class in the country so far, and a lot of the credit needs to also go to Pierce Clarkson, the quarterback. And for those that follow football recruiting, that last name sounds familiar because his dad, Steve Clarkson, is a quarterback guru who's tutored a number of the top Southern California quarterbacks, and Pierce is out there at St. John Bosco, one of the top high school football programs in the country. He committed in late January, and since then, the Cards have been on a run. They got Aaron Williams, a 4-star cornerback from out there in California. They get DeAndre Moore, a former Oklahoma committed at Los Al, that's a 4-star receiver. And then they get the most coveted guy in the bunch, Ruben Owens. I do think a little bit, we don't know 1,000% sure, but it does sure seems like there's some smoke involved. The NIL is going to play a factor in many of these kids' decisions. And so, yeah, I give Scott Satterfield a lot of credit for playing the system for how it's set up right now.
Jeremy, a pretty banner, couple days for Ohio State, especially with their wide receiver recruiting. I mean, Brandon Ennis joins Carnell Tate as a duo of 5-star wideouts that have now pledged to the Buckeyes here as of late. Your thoughts on that? Obviously, they've got great pedigree, but impressive nonetheless.
Yeah, but Brian Hartline, the receiver coach up there in Columbus, is continuing to prove that he is maybe the best recruiter in the entire country right now. And it is a very attractive system. I mean, they put guys in the NFL, and that system is very attractive. You know, if you go to Ohio State, you're going to have the ball thrown your way, but you also know you're going to have a high-profile quarterback coming your way. So the last 2 years in a row, they've signed the number 1 quarterback in the country. They don't have a quarterback yet in this 2023 class, but they've got the next guy in 2024 already committed to Dilla Raiola from out in Chandler, Arizona, the number 1 quarterback in the 2024 class. So if you go into Ohio State, you're going to have a high-profile quarterback thrown your way. And, this Ohio State class, it's still early. And we still have to wait till some of these SEC schools make their run, but it's an awful special class, and landing 2 5-star receivers on back-to-back days is going to be something that folks talk about for a while.
And, they have been flirting with Austin Novosad, the young quarterback out of Dripping Springs, who's committed to Baylor, and that's kind of like Baylor's bell cow for their class of 2023. And you never know. He visited Waco this weekend, and he's still committed to Baylor, and hopefully the Bears think that they'll keep him. But that was kind of interesting that Ohio State reached out to him.
Yeah, no doubt. They're certainly kicking the tires. Let's put it that way. And Baylor's doing everything possible to keep him on board. And I was a guy that I kind of saw this kid early on and was like, golly, I mean, he was a kind of a guy that was just outside the top 300 of most national lists, a guy that once you see it in person and film, you can see why the Bears went in early on him. And it's no surprise. I think he's more than good enough to play at a high level Big 12, but also high enough to go play, good talent enough to go play to a place like at Ohio State. So if you're Baylor, you're doing everything humanly possible. Coach Rand and staff are doing everything humanly possible to keep him on board.
Jeremy, the Baylor overall with what Dave Aranda's done, and they're starting to pick up an uptick. Near the end of Art Browse's regime, they were starting to have higher ranked classes. because they were winning and getting more and more attention. And in fact, the last one was a tremendous class that was blown up because he was fired. Do you start to see maybe a little bit with Dave Aranda's staff having more and more high profile, the 3 and 4 stars more than just mainly the 3 stars joining them?
Well, and the battle with them last year is that they got they had a lot of good class committed, and other schools started chipping away at some of those kids, and that's going to be the battle for them staying the course here in the future. Yes, that they do have a very good foundation right now in the top 25, actually number 24 in the On3 consensus team recruiting ranking. You have the quarterback, you have Christian Brathwaite from Cy Ranch down in Houston. That's an outstanding linebacker prospect. Corey Kelly, a great edge with an edge prospect down there at Clear Falls. So you're right. You are starting to see uptick in talent at guys looking at the Bears, and I love how they evaluate even the guys that are somewhat lower ranked. They seem to fit their style and scheme really well. But Smokey, the battle's got to be to keep those guys committed when some of the other schools come knocking on the door and realize, oh yeah, Baylor did a great job evaluating those guys, so got to keep them committed.
What coaches nationally do you feel like have to have a really good summer in closing to the knuckling through the season about losing some of their recruits?
Well, you mentioned the number one guy I was going to mention, and that's Satterfeld out there at Louisville, because there's just high expectations, especially when in state you see the job that Coach Stoops at Kentucky's done. I mean, you want to win and win big against your big in-state rival, but when you see Kentucky make a lot of success in the SEC, you want to be able to compete with them. So I noticed that also. But how about Tennessee? I mean, we know that Josh Heupel has had that program kind of on the right trajectory, but they are recruiting at a level that they've not seen in a long time. So many 5 stars, high profile 4 stars already committed to them. But I think that they might have to continue to prove it on the field a little bit this season to ensure that some of those guys stay on board. And I hate saying this. This really bothers me to say this, but I think Dabo Swinney, the way that he is recruited kind of against the grain and taking things a little bit slower than some other folks and not throwing out tons of offers and saying, if you're committed to me, you're not taking any other official visits. That policy is something that kind of runs counter to what we see in college football now. I think they need to have a successful season to maybe keep some of the pieces that they have in place right now. They do have the number 6 class in the country. They've got a great quarterback, tremendous defensive core coming already. But if they struggle on the field again this season, it's going to certainly allow some of those SEC schools and other ACC schools to come knocking on the door of these kids.
Jeremy, I think we'd be remiss if we had a recruiting segment and didn't ask you about Arch Manning, and I guess you just go ahead and just reveal where he's going if you want to. But what is kind of just the latest with him? The scuttlebutt surrounding him. I know it's been Bama, Georgia, Texas, and I guess any given week you could say one has the momentum. But what are you kind of seeing from your point of view?
No, I do still think Texas has the momentum. I mean, they did a very good job of hosting him on his visit. He's done with all his main spring official visits now, so we could see a decision soon, or we could see a decision he could go ahead and wait and get it and wait until after the season and drag it out a little bit. So I do think it was telling that Alabama went after another quarterback, so you can maybe read between the lines a little bit and think that Alabama's a little bit out of this race. So to me, this is a Texas-Georgia battle, and Ton Bunkin and A.J. Milwee, the 2 recruiters that are going head-to-head for this. And I'll be honest, Coach Sark is doing the heavy lifting job also for UT, but those 2 guys are battling hard for Texas. Right now, the On3 recruiting prediction machine does give Texas a 50.3% chance of landing him over Georgia, but I guys, I can make a real good case for both these 2 programs to land him. They check a lot of the boxes that he's looking for.
Where would he play earlier? Which of the 2 places would he play first?
And I think he's going to play both places right away. That's the kind of the thing. That's the thing. He believes he's good enough, and the pedigree is good enough, and the depth charts. yes, both schools have recruited at high levels, but this is Arch Manning. This is the number one player in the country. This is the number one quarterback. This is a Manning. So I think he believes, and I think he can make a legitimate argument looking at both depth charts that he could play right away at either school. I do think maybe that the path is just slightly better at Texas, especially if we see what happens with the situation this year and how it develops down there in Austin. Maybe that sorts itself out. But I don't know, guys. I think this is one of those battles that he's good enough. He could probably compete for playing time right away at either place.
Your national rankings changed this week with Ohio State. Craig mentioned Ennis and Tate. Notre Dame has had a great run with Marcus Freeman. Is he proving that you can? And Notre Dame has always been able to recruit, but there's been some ups and downs. But is he proving to be a better overall recruiter than even Brian Kelly's regime?
Yes, I think the kids like him a lot. He's young. He's energetic. He retained a lot of his staff there or a lot of Brian Kelly's staff, the guys that were tremendous recruiters. But I still think we need to wait and see what happens on the field this year a little bit before we anoint him as a surefire this is going to work in South Bend type situation, because everybody gets excited about a new coach and all the pomp and circumstance that goes with that. But when it comes down to it, he's going to have to win on the field, and this season's going to be key for him to maybe keep some of these guys on board that are committed to him.
USC, Alabama, Georgia, on and on. The same teams you see, Penn State, A&M. Louisville's the one that jumped up. We've mentioned them. Tennessee,
yeah. You
mentioned them, and there's 3 to 5 others that will end up fighting for those top 10 as well. Lincoln Riley at USC as well. Your thoughts about A&M this year? Had the number one class by far last year, although Alabama was right there. Do you feel like they can follow that up again with possibly a number one class this year?
Oh boy, that's going to be tough, guys, because last year's class was so dang good. It was like one. I mean, you guys have been doing this, following this as long as I have, and I don't remember a crew that is as good as that we've ever seen there in this 2022 class at A&M. Can they compete for the number one spot again? Sure. Either they do have 5 guys already committed. I think a lot of it's going to be determined what happens here in these summer months. Can they get these kids on campus, get some momentum going, and then close strong? Because we all know that they do have a lot of positive things that they can sell, and if they have some success on the field, they'll close strong. But will we see a class like that again? Boy, I just don't know. That 22 class was just 1 in a million type group.
Jeremy, one more thing for me on the Big 12. You see Texas Tech, Kansas State, Cincinnati, who will be a part of the Big 12. They all are having a pretty good run. How much of theirs is quantity over quality right now, the numbers rather than the number of stars?
Not a ton, to be honest. I mean, that's what's kind of, at least based on how we do our rankings, which are a little bit different than some of the other folks. Quantity doesn't really go into it a ton. We limit the ability for a class, say Texas Tech. I know Texas Tech and a lot of other folks, because they do have 20 commitments. They're really high ranked in some of the other folks, other services rankings. But there is some quality certainly in that Texas Tech class. But I think once you come down to it, you'll still see Oklahoma up there. You'll see Texas up there. I anticipate Oklahoma State once they make their run. And keep it. You mentioned K-State. Keep an eye on them. I think they're getting ready to make a run here. I live here in Kansas City, and we've not seen a year like we're seeing in this 23 class in Kansas ever. I mean, there's 12 to 15 high-profile Big 12 level kids, and K-State's about to land 6 of them, including Avery Johnson, the 4-star quarterback from down in the Wichita area. So if they wheel him in there, I think K-State could be one of these classes that really surprises a whole lot of folks also.
Jeremy, thank you, man. Appreciate your time. Keep up the great work. I knew you back when you were 5 years old, I think.
I feel like it.
You've done so well. Jeremy Crabtree, Senior Editor on 3 Sports. Again, they do a great job. I mentioned the top 10, and there's a lot. Like Texas Tech has 20 commitments, and there's some that are behind them. And I didn't mean that as any way of trying to say that Baylor's always been that way. Baylor, again, there's certain schools that are going to rise, the cream rises to the top with the kind of players they get. But there's no doubt Tech is having a great run with Joey McGuire. Baylor's having a nice run with Aranda. And as I mentioned, Kansas State and what they're doing with Chris Kleiman, and Cincinnati with Luke Fickell.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Did somebody at Texas Tech get upset?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, because it's not a criticism. It's just that there's no doubt they benefited in certain rankings by the fact that they've had 20 commits, and other teams around them have had 12 or 11. And on certain sites, I'd say like 247. The more you have, the higher ranked you are. Doesn't matter who they are. If you just have more guys, you're going to be ranked higher. If you go to, let's say, an On3, they do it a little bit differently to where it's not so much like he said, if you got 20, you're going to be higher than the team with 14 no matter what. I think they do it more where it's geared towards your higher ranked guys. So you could have smaller class but more, let's say, 4 stars, then you're going to be ranked higher than the class who just has a bunch more guys. Does that make sense? So they do it differently. I don't know what Rivals does. I haven't honestly checked in on them in a while, but I'm sure they have their own way as well that's a little bit different. But I just know those two in particular is kind of the gist that I've gotten from how they do it. So yeah, I mean, it's all, you can read it however you want to read it, like people can read it and take it positively or read it and take it negatively or whatever. But I think just being mentioned and being up there near the top there for a while for Tech was a really good boost. But for example, if you look at, let's say, the 2023 rankings for them, okay, they're number 5 on 247, right? They're behind Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, and Georgia, who all have at least 5 less commits than they do, but they still rank a high. So there's Tech at 5 in the 247. Let's go to On3. They're 16.
Yep.
So, again, eye of the beholder, however you want to look into it, but there's obviously a massive difference in kind of how they're viewed, and yet there's, Ohio State's 1 in one of them, and they're 2 in the other. So it just kind of depends what you want to look at.
Michael Davis on the chat room, great point. Texas Tech will surely finish lower than they are now, probably top 30, I think, but that's a massive improvement for them than where they have been recently and in the past, and that is the key.
They don't need to finish number 1. Yeah, I mean, for them to finish top 25 would be a hell of a freaking class and would be a big deal. I mean, yeah, that would be a massive deal. So absolutely agree with you. It doesn't have to be top 5 or top 10. That's what you'd eventually like it to be. But kind of like with Baylor and Aranda, was like you get a top 30 class there just to start off with, and then you move up in your top 25 class, and then, you hope to get into a top 20 class. It's all about the progress. But, yeah, if they can land a top 25 to 30 for McGuire in full year 1, that would be incredible. But I think one thing that Jeremy did mention, and this is, something I said on the podcast earlier, I'm so damn ready for the season to get here because I'm loving all the positivity and excitement, but I'm ready to cut through the BS. There's a lot of teams right now that are riding these coaching changes and recruiting rankings and all this stuff that are going to roll out teams that aren't nearly as good as they're supposed to be, and there's going to be teams that go over their expectations, and I'm just going to be fascinated because that will have a major impact on recruiting.
One note.